Greetings, students. Today we are here with Mary Ellen Bates, and you may remember Mary Ellen Bates for her talk in the second week of our course. This conversation is for a Rutgers University course called Search in the Information Landscape. So our guest is Mary Ellen Bates, as I mentioned. I've bumped into Mary Ellen Bates a number of times at conferences, most notably at Computers and Libraries, where her talk is one of my must-hears or sees. And her slides are valuable to me, and we use them in our course. Mary Ellen describes herself as a longtime info geek. She left corporate information centers after a while and started her own business in 1991. Providing high-end research and analysis services to strategic decision makers. And she mentions that her projects have really had broad range, for discovering the market for secondhand Black Hawk helicopters to save the safety of biotech manufacturing processes, to background on hedge fund managers and trends in Australian wines, which I can get behind. Yes. So she's also a frequent keynote speaker. She's written white papers and 7 books. And her 7th book I'm particularly interested in because it's something that I hope that you will adopt as a philosophy too. She calls that 7th book The Reluctant Entrepreneur, Making a Living Doing What You Love. She has won numerous awards, has been active in the Special Libraries Association, the Association of Independent Information Professionals. I want to just mention some of the things that always stick with my students about what you say. Among those things are, the first search is for you. We maybe can pick up some of these things later. You've talked about, with my students, the importance of less discoverable things like gray literature, searching using PDFs. The notion of how you know you're done with a search, that is something we seldom talk about, but I think it's really important. The value that an information professional adds to a search in a world where everybody has access to powerful search tools. And the importance of your search terms. And in this world, I think we're talking about the prompts that we use as well as traditional search terms. So, Mary Ellen, a warm welcome to you. What are you up to these days before we jump into our talk?
Well, goodness, still doing lead generation work for a number of vendors. I just finished a series of interviews of info pros in data-driven enterprises and trying to learn how the info scientists, info pros, and the data scientists can work more collaboratively and see what they both bring to the table. So that's been really interesting. Like you, doing more thinking about generative AI, although I don't think it's the solution to our problems necessarily. And I'm doing a lot of work for small businesses, helping them understand their market and then grow appropriately, especially in this new economy that we're in. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's a lot. So as you're doing this work, what I know that some of our students are interested, like you are, in special libraries and business applications. What do you love these days?
Yeah, I think the most important search tool is our brain. Curiosity, dissatisfaction with what we're finding, and the drive to find insights in what we're looking for. We've got the same search engines we've had for 20 years. Google is talking about completely redoing their search engine. And they're scared witless about ChatGPT and other generative AI tools. But to me, it's the finding tools themselves, especially when we're searching outside our own enterprise. I mean, there's a whole other conversation about internal information management and information systems that librarians and info pros can play a big role in. When we're talking about searching out in the world, I think no tools are perfect. Different ones come and go. I don't know. I give a talk, super searcher tips, which is what you mentioned. Thank you so much. At computers in libraries and then internet librarian. So every 6 months, I kind of pull together my new views about what's happening in search. And I've almost quit talking about a lot of new sources because they change so much and they change not at all. But it's much more of how are we approaching the new information landscape. We're getting different kinds of questions from our clients. What kind of analysis, insight, distillation are they expecting from us? I'm finding that more of my research questions don't involve finding an answer, but creating an answer. And I think that's a really big difference that librarians need to get their heads around, that the days of being able to get a reference question, toddle over to the reference shelf, pull something out, say, here's the page that gives you the answer, those days are gone. I don't know if they ever really existed. So now I'm getting, I mean, my favorite example about this is I was asked to find trends in artificial stone market. This is the stuff that you put on the side of your house to make it
Oh,
look
I
like
know
it
all
was
about this.
yeah. And so they wanted to know about new trends in that industry. Turns out there's no discussion of new trends in that industry. Nothing new is happening, basically. And so what I finally did was I went into the US Patent and Trademark Office database, looked for the classification code for artificial stone, looked for patents filed in the last 5 years on the assumption that if it was something new and innovative, someone would want to patent it. What I found was only a limited number of patents altogether, and they were all about kind of trivial changes in the manufacturing process.
Hmm.
And I'm not a patent searcher, this was really quick and dirty, but that's okay. So I took what I saw there, and I didn't send my client the copies of the patents because that's not what they asked for. But I said, I analyzed the patents that were filed in the last 5 years in this area, and it appears that there are no new innovations. I also searched the trade and professional literature, didn't find blah. So the answer to their question was, it wasn't a no, there's nothing. It's a here's why there's nothing. And so that was a true answer for him, but it wasn't something that I could do a search, find that answer, cite that page, and send it off to him. So long answer to the question. I think that so much of search these days is bringing a fresh attitude and saying and using the search tools not to find the answer, but to find the next source to go to. There's a lot more following rabbit holes until you
That's
find
what
the
I
right
was
rabbit.
thinking. So, among the things that I'm hearing you say is that nobody's really coming to us for known item types of searches anymore. I wonder if it would be very hard for me to say, okay, there aren't any trends, because I would, I love the jump to patent searching. I used to be a patent searcher. And, it didn't occur to me immediately, but as soon as you said it, I went, oh yeah, what a great idea. But that might not be something that occurs to every student or every librarian to make that jump. And I love the creative way that we think. And when we talk to each other, we spur each other into brainstorming new ideas. And then I would have thought that those patents would have given you ideas, new terms, but they, as you said, they were all very similar. You had that redundancy there that is a kind of a signal.
So to answer your question about other people might not have known to go to patents, well, I didn't know to go to patents. Here's the thing, to handle research questions today, you shouldn't just know the question. You have to know what's going to happen with what you send to your client or your patron or your user. Because when I know what it is they're trying to do, then if I don't find the answer that I'm expecting to find, I know how to pivot strategically. Since the client who was in the artificial stone industry, I knew what he was going to be doing with the information that I sent him. So I knew that this approach would have been a good one. I was working on another project where they needed to understand trends in people for whom English is not their first language, who use Medicare and Medicaid services. And they were looking for all this data. Well, the data doesn't exist. So it hasn't been collected. So I was looking at what is this question? What's the business need that this question is addressing? I know because I talked to the client. And then I started thinking, well, what other kinds of information that are parallel to this that might also help my client make that decision that they need to make? And so I went off in another area, found some other statistics that were real helpful. I just talked to him yesterday about it. So it isn't having a mental Rolodex of all the places to go. It really is having an attitude that I will figure out something that will move my client closer to an informed decision. And what's that going to be this time? And it just takes some kind of random thinking until you start thinking of what would be a signal of the answer. What would be a parallel answer that would also make sense?
I love that. Because I think that part of the reason people are information geeks is because there is a creativity in this process that a lot of people don't recognize. So, and I guess the client was happy with the answer that they didn't have to go crazy relating to new trends if there really weren't so many new trends. So not only were they happy with your services and analysis, they were probably pleased with the answer as well. So, all right. So, how are you? I know you've been thinking about generative AI. You had this wonderful short post on ChatGPT for researchers, and in it you list several applications that you see as useful, and they seem to me to be kind of the assistant type. Could you talk about some of the things that you think this type of service does well? Some of the things on your list, perhaps?
Yeah. I'd like to start with what it doesn't do well. I mean, the thing that we forget is that generative AI tools like ChatGPT are large language models. So what they've done is they've learned how language works, how people typically talk, how people typically write. And so it's a very, very sophisticated autocomplete algorithm, basically. And so, and a great example that I got in a conversation with someone else recently, if you ask ChatGPT, what is 2 + 2? ChatGPT will tell you it's 4. But then you ask it, do you know arithmetic? Do you know mathematics? And the algorithm will respond, no, I don't. I can't do calculation. I simply know that when people say 2 + 2, they then follow it with 4. And so there's no reasoning that's going on, only prediction. And that's a very critical difference. Prediction and summarization. So I think that ChatGPT and other generative AI is useful for summarizing something you find. If I'm doing a search and I get some YouTube videos that look useful, I'll throw the transcript at a generative AI and ask it to summarize that so that I don't have to watch a half-an-hour video to know whether it would be useful for my client, for example. That it does great for. It does great at generating form letters. If you need to send a sort of a generic request, it can just create the business letter then with fill in the blank kind of things. Again, it's just summarizing what it's seen out there. I don't think that they're at all useful for actually giving answers. So for the examples that I gave, there was one that was asking for reliable sources or asking for a few experts in the field. It's not actually analyzing to determine reliable sources or well-known expert. The algorithm is saying who's cited frequently, who is cited to, who is, among doing, if you do a knowledge graph, who shows up basically is what it's doing. So using using generative AI to simply sift through something that you've already identified, it's great. If you're asking it to find information, I think that's a misuse of generative AI. It is not useful for finding information because that doesn't play to its strengths. Does that answer the question?
Oh yeah, and I've kind of demonstrated it with Reader's Advisory, for instance. So, instead of asking it for the best Afrofuturist books to recommend to a teenager, I would instead list the 6 or 7 books that have won the most awards that are in that genre and have been selected by YA librarians, because I know that's the sort of thing it can list. And then I can ask for summaries of those titles. Then I can ask for that list to be translated into Spanish. And there are things that I can count on, and I think it depends upon your explanation of what it can't do well is really helpful in terms of prompt engineering, and learning how to leverage it in a productive way.
When you say prompt engineering, you mean designing a search?
I guess I'm using that phrase wrong. Because I think there's a whole profession that is prompt engineering right now. What I'm thinking about is learning to use language to search in a different way. And so help me understand what we call this thing that is a strategy for using generative AI search, and recognizing also that Chat GPT is not the only game in town, and this is evolving, but it's not prompt engineering. So what do we call this strategy for search?
I would use a lighter term than strategy,
Okay.
because I remember, way back in the ancient days when we were searching in the fee-based online services, and you had to design, the nested logic and this or this or this and this or this or this, all that kind of stuff.
This class has
And
had dialogue instruction.
yes, and so but that was the only way that you could search way back in the day. And so it was very important to construct a good search.
Mm-hmm.
And what I noticed back then was that I really kind of got attached to that search, and I would pound it for all I could, but I kind of got invested in whatever approach I was taking. That may make sense in some databases when you're searching less defined databases, and certainly when you're searching the open web. I think a lighter touch is called for, where I'm just going to try a few words and see what happens. The first search is going to be a little bit ugly. In fact, one of the things that I really recommend for people when they're doing research in an area where they don't know a lot about the topic, they're kind of exploring it as they go. This is where I think using a non-tracking search engine instead of Google is really helpful, because I don't want the search engine to be basing the relevance ranking on the last 2 searches that I did as well, because those were less artful. As I keep searching, looking at the results, seeing what words show up, it's a dance. It's not an approach. It's a dance. You're flirting with the information. You're, coming in and going away and seeing who else is out there. It's much more of an organic, dynamic process. And so the less attached we are to our ideas about what we're going to find and what words will get us there, the faster we'll actually get to the truth, to what really is out there.
But Mary Ellen, I love the idea of this lighter touch of search, and it being a dance and also a creative activity. I don't want to keep you much longer than the time we've allotted, but so what are you excited about these days, and what tips might you have for new professionals?
What am I excited about? I'm certainly interested in the ways that text and data mining, semantic search, other deeper ways, richer than full text kind of searches, are getting are getting a lot more attention these days. Most of them, unfortunately, I guess for me, most of that search power is going to be within an enterprise. And this is where I think um, I would love to be a library school student today, because the opportunities are so huge and there are so many places within organizations outside of a library, but inside, in a data-driven enterprise like many of them are today, there's lots of roles for information specialists who can, look at pulling the pieces together and enabling better decisions and embedding intelligence in people's finding tools. I mean, there's like so many cool things to do and so many new resources and tools to search them. I think that's really, really interesting. It's really a fun thing. For advice, I think so much of it is to assume that you're not going to figure it out. Learn to live with more ambiguity, that you probably won't be able to find exactly what you're looking for. What you think you find, you're probably going to be wrong about. And so the sooner you're happy with letting go of your preconceptions of what you'll find or what's out there, and also always having a sense of the bigger context of the reference question that you're working with, not just the question itself, even though it sounds really straightforward, but what will this be used for? What's driving this question? What will happen to my information that I send to this person after I'm done and gone on to something else? What's going to happen to that information, and how can I make sure that it is in a format and a structure that it itself for that purpose, whatever it is?
Thank you. So, Mary Ellen, I know you have a lot of advice for my students, and I know you've been thinking about what you wish my students got or our students got in library school. What are we not doing well in your mind?
That's a great question. Thank you. And this is from having, gone through library school and not really knowing where I was going to be working afterward, and talking with a number of other educators over the course of, the many decades. What I think is really important is often people in library school assume that they'll be working in big libraries, or that they will, walk in the front door and across the name on the building is something library. And some of you may be, but most of the jobs, and I think the more interesting, certainly better paid, more stimulating, more cutting edge, interesting jobs, if you're interested in search and research, the more interesting jobs are not in traditional libraries. They're going to be in organizations, nonprofits, government agencies, for-profit organizations, and you won't be part of a giant library. You'll be part of a bigger organization that's doing something out there in the world, who need, just like they need accountants, they need lawyers, they need HR people, and they need information professionals to further the aims of that larger organization. So you won't be somewhere where everybody has the same kind of a background. You'll be constantly being thrown into areas where you don't know what you're doing at first. You don't know the topic. You're being brought into a task force where they're doing the work, but they want a librarian sitting in the room watching for opportunities to bring in new information resources that they didn't know about. So it's finding new ways to deploy the information skills and information insights that you're building while you're in library school, and then thinking of this is an amazing skill set that can be brought into lots of different organizations and used really effectively. As I've been interviewing all of these librarians who are working with data scientists within organizations, nonprofits, NGOs, lots of places, and it's so cool because they're like this magic person who's brought into a team, and this is the person who can say, oh, I can license this, I can get a text and data mining license for this would allow you to do this, I can bring in an ontology that would help you make sense out of this information and help you find these things in a new way. And people are looking at the librarian like he or she is magic. And that, to me, is where the really exciting jobs are, is where you're taking the skills that you know and deploying them out there in the world, not making people come to a library to get information, but us taking our brilliance and our information skills out into the workplace.
That is a fabulous way to conclude this. And an important message. And so I really, it is a little scary as well as a little exciting. And you will feel that you're not the smartest kid on the block at first.
Well,
And yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you there. And that's absolutely true. In fact, I was talking to one librarian in a pharma company, and she said, when I'm in a room with other professionals, I am the one with the fewest advanced degrees. And I know that. And it used to be intimidating. Then she said, but what I realized is they're experts in their field. I'm the only expert in the room on information science, information management, information discovery. I know more about that than anyone else in the room. So it's the ability to see yourself as a peer with people in other areas, even when, especially when, they can be a little bit intimidating. So realizing that we're bringing as much to the table as they are. And the other thing, which I should have mentioned but forgot to until just now, I think the way to thrive as an information professional is to be able to live slightly outside your comfort zone, because that's where all the really interesting things happen. To be willing to say, I don't know, I've never done that before, but I'll try, or to try something, see that it doesn't work, figure out what you learn from it, pivot and move on to something else. That ability to, fail and get up again, learn from it, and try something else new and fun. That's where the magic lays.
Love it.
Okay.
Thanks again, Mary Ellen Bates. We're so happy you joined us today.
Thank you. This was a lovely conversation, Joyce. Really enjoyed talking with you.